Hey, folks. Welcome to another episode of Construction Over Coffee. I am your host, Jeff Raymond, and today I am thrilled and very grateful to have Tommy Linstroth on the podcast with us today. Tommy is the founder and CEO of Green Badger. They are a leading SaaS provider that simplifies sustainability and ESG in the built industry. Tommy, thanks for joining us. Really been looking forward to this. Welcome to the show.
Jeff, excited to be here. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely, likewise. So let's get into it. Green Badger, been a lot of buzz around that company. Tell me a little bit about it.
Sure. So Green Badger, we are a software company built to really streamline and automate green construction compliance for the built environment. So we're a platform used primarily by general contractors, but by a growing number of architects, consultants, subcontractors as well. But really, it's around how do we most easily, cost effectively, simply integrate sustainability into the design and construction of all of the construction projects going on as far as we can.
It's been a hot topic recently, and I think a necessary one, and it's been good to see that the last several years, a big shining light has been put on it, and some states are obviously taking a little bit more impactfully and seriously than others, which means y'all must be busy working on some fun and exciting things from what I hear. What's driving a lot of your day to day right now over at Green Badger? What's taking up a lot of your time there? What's the focus point?
Sure. So really, it's continued rollout and acceleration of implementation of the platform. I mean, as you mentioned, green construction requirements have been growing. They used to be about 20% of the total U.S. Marketplace had some type of requirements. That's now doubled. It's about 40%, and it's supposed to get up to around two-thirds of it by the end of this decade. And so for our customers, who again typically are the general contractors, it's a contractual obligation. So it's nothing anyone's saying, hey, this might be nice to have, or we should think about, doing these types of things or using these types of products or using these practices on a job site. It is written in there. The building's got to be 150,000 square feet. It's got to be 8 stories tall, and it's got to have these layers of sustainability requirements. And as you mentioned, sometimes it's driven regulatorily by a city or by a state. Like Boston, pretty much anything coming out of Boston to get your certificate of occupancy, you have to demonstrate sustainability in the design and construction of your building, or it's a client-driven requirement. 95% of Fortune 100 companies have some type of sustainability requirement as part of their building standard. And so again, by the time it gets to the contractor, it's just another thing that they have to do. And frankly, a lot of teams in the field, they're not material scientists. They don't have PhDs. They're not, reading parts per million or parts per billion of chemical compositions of products, which is what some of these standards really ask you to get into. And so we're really built to be like an easy button, so that when they get these requirements, they don't have to be experts. They don't have to spend $100,000 on consultants. They can just hit the easy button, automate a lot of that compliance, and get on to what's important to them, which is getting their buildings built on time and on budget, not chasing down hundreds or thousands of pages of paperwork.
It's interesting. Before the show kicked off, you and I were talking about that, and depending on where the GC might be building and in the state, in some cases they need entire teams dedicated and devoted to figuring out, how do we do this? How do we ensure that we're doing this? And how do we stay compliant from a QA, QC, and from a state mandate point of view? So I'm curious, tell us a little bit about how Green Badger can do that for your clients, and what are some of the problems that, outside of what you mentioned, tend to get solved with it?
Sure, and that's really why I started Green Badger. We're working on some projects like LaGuardia and JFK, and some of these just mega projects that go on for years and years. And again, you're talking hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals that are in and out of this project over the course of a decade of construction. And to have these types of obligations that you need to ensure that the data is accurate and valid and in place so that at the end of the day, a decade later, you can get, some type of building certification is really a challenge. I came out of the industry. I was doing this first on the owner side. So it was our own projects and our own money. Started then moved into consulting, and a lot of it was done in spreadsheets, and it still is today. So again, when you talk QA QC, you're talking about hundreds of materials and products, tens of millions of dollars of materials that are trying to be tracked, managed, recorded and reported on in a spreadsheet that you're hoping didn't get messed up along the way, or that if a project engineer rolled off to a new project, they didn't, take that file with them or something that you can't get access to. So trying to manage all of those practices, and procedures and material management, it's a huge QA QC problem. And again, this is a contractual obligation. So if you get to the end of the day and somebody who was working on this project 2 years ago screwed something up, and now you're on the hook for it, that's just, that's not a cool position to be in. And so our software is really built to help automate that, to take out some of the human potential errors in it, but as well as just to provide a centralized repository, a cloud-based system, so that there is auditability, there is consistency, there is transparency into this process, so that nobody's left out hanging out to dry at the end of the day. That it does provide that breadcrumb trail of what's been going on since day one, to help demonstrate that yes, this team has been doing what we're supposed to be doing and hopefully exceeding those requirements, but providing it to get rid of those manual processes, that manual review, and those thousands of lines of Excel that are typically frustrating project teams.
Typically, all the time, man.
Yeah, that's
That's
not even. I wish this was limited to sustainability, but my goodness, it's scheduling. It's everything. You came from the industry. I'm sure you were living neck deep in it. It's still boggles my mind that with the Procores and the Autodesks of the world out there, we still have clipping the paper clip from Excel is driving a lot of the construction processes.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are still some firms out there, we'll say, that are doing things in Excel or manually or in anything besides an actual project management or estimating software. And my goodness, thank you, but absolutely no thank you. Curious, is there a particular industry or industries in terms of your clients' focus that you see a greater demand for sustainability for example, healthcare, maybe office buildings, hospitality, retail? Is there any particular industry that you find is driving this more than others on the building side?
It's pretty diverse. I mean, I will say some of it comes down to end client size. And again, 95% of Fortune 100 companies have some type of sustainability requirements. So that's covering everything from data centers to coffee shops to bank branches and really, really anything in between. And, frankly, it makes sense because they tend to be owner occupier of those facilities, right? So like they want to
No.
have healthy environments for their employees. They're going to reap the benefits of having uh, having lower utility bills. So I mean that's definitely a driver of it. Public sector is a huge driver again, whether that's local level, whether that's states, whether that's federal level. A lot of those requirements have just been sort of baked into the building codes for a decade or 2 decades or so. Higher education is a huge driver. Again, long-term holder of real estate assets, so they definitely are going to see those benefits. And a lot of multifamily, I think, is again, when you're competing with everybody else in the market to get leases and to get your apartments leased up, whether you're a true believer or whether it's just a differentiator for your product, or whether it's a market standard of, well, every other apartment in this block has some type of sustainability feature, we need to do it to play ball. So it really is pretty diverse, across the range of product types. And yeah.
That's good to hear. And you mentioned Boston is all in, California as well. Are there any other states that you see that have really taken the ball and run with it as opposed to others?
Yeah, I mean, California, they've got their whole own building code standard for it. It's called Cal Green. So, they
Mm.
use third-party certifications like LEED certification as well. But Cal Green's a driver. California is also driving some newer requirements around the both carbon disclosure of your business operations, and for a general contractor, half of those people are at job sites. So when you're in office, when you're at a software company like us and it's one office, it makes it really easy. When you're a GC and you've got half of your workforce is at 100 different job sites operating out of trailers and temporary workspaces, that it can make that a lot more challenging for those individuals. But California's got requirements on that, as well as the embodied carbon of materials that go into effect this year. Boston, as a city, for sure, Maryland, DC, San Antonio, Austin. Really, it's scattered. It's not just small enclaves. It's broad swaths have some of these requirements in place. So that's why the market is growing. I mean, it's not just random fire station in the middle of South Dakota. It's the entire city of Boston having some type of requirement. If you want to build anything over 10,000 square feet, you're going to have to incorporate some of these things into your project.
Yep. And I'm taking notes as I said too, because this topic is fascinating to me and I want to be able to research this later. And anything I can learn and bring to the table and use to have conversation with others to drive that awareness, it's a positive thing in this industry. Um, you know, I've noticed that, my gosh, the construction industry, one of the greatest, if not the greatest industry in the world. Of course, I'm highly biased, but one of the challenges that I think they face, and a typical stereotype they'll be up against, is that it tends to be a very antiquated industry, resistant to change. You'll hear, "Hey, we've always done it this way. Why would we change?" And slow adopters is what I've seen. And I'm curious, has that been your experience? Do you see things changing specifically around sustainability and ESG requirements with your clients in this space?
We've seen in general, like if you look at the research that GCs or the construction industry has been lagging on IT investment and some of those things. So I hear you on that regard. And I think it is, where we are today is a world different than we were. But what I found is that this industry, it's a service industry, right? And it's like if you have this, everyone is more than happy to do it. What they don't like is lack of clarity. It's like if you just tell us what to do, we will do it. You want us to use this certain product, we will do it. But don't make me again the material scientist. Like the architect should just say, "Hey, this is the ceiling tile to use. It's been vetted. It's got all of the processes." Don't just write a generic spec that now forces myself or my subcontractors to become sustainability gurus and have to spend the time and effort to go
Yep.
figure this stuff out. Like what I found is by far and away, nobody's resistant to it. And they, will happily do it and happily champion it when it's clear and presented in a way that is understandable. When it becomes, when they have to become the sustainability detective and search for clues to figure out how to do it, that's like anything else. It's like, my goodness, I don't have time to do that. That's not part of my job description or part of my expertise or level of understanding. And just tell us what to do and we will happily do it and we will adopt whatever you'd like us to do. But like we're not equipped to have to figure this out. That is really not our job. So that's where I see sort of the disconnect.
Agreed. Agreed. It's tell me what to do. It'd be great if you tell me why I should do it. Even better if you can tell me how to do it. Either way, I'll get it done. And, in terms of the future of sustainability, right? It's been talked about for maybe 5, 10 years. It's definitely the last several years has become more forefront. What is the future that you see? What changes do you see? Just, if you're looking into your crystal ball 5, 10 years from now, what does it look like?
Sure. Well, the thing with sustainability, right? I mean, it's a broad term, but in terms of even just green construction and some of the standards, it's been an evolution, right? It's never been a this is the end game. it's been a, hey, here's where we were when, lead certification first started in 2000 or 2001. And then it's progressively evolving to drive a higher standard with a recognition that, we might not have all the answers today. And then in 10 years, we might. I mean, it goes, look at the efficiency of solar panels where they were 30 years ago versus where they are today. And they're, 2 to 3 to 4 times better. And I think some of these buildings require, they'll require that same level of iteration before we get there. And at the end of the day, if you were to ask somebody like me, what does that mean? It's like we want our buildings to be able to operate, efficiently, self-sufficiently, and that's challenging for a skyscraper, and is a world of difference than what a single family house might have. So I think sustainability looks different for every building type. We see a lot of it around data centers now, right? Bigger data centers, all of the processing power that's going to be required for AI, and that's 24/7 demand on a building. And so that's how are we powering those buildings, and how can we do that cleanly and efficiently? And that again looks a world different than it looks like for your house or my house or something that's smaller in nature. So I think we're going to continue to see an evolution, and that there's not one magic bullet that's going to magically save everything. It does take effort, and it's not just saying, hey, we're going to keep building to code and hoping that's sufficient, because that's just the status quo. It is going above and beyond, and it is taking leadership role in the design and construction of those buildings to set us on a path, because we want to have buildings that are healthy to be in, buildings that are comfortable to be in, buildings that are efficient and effective to run and operate, and in a way that is sustainable for years and decades to come here.
Agreed. Let's pretend let's pretend you're talking to an owner, CEO, the board, or an exec team of a potential client. They're GC. They're saying, yeah, we've heard some things about sustainability. Maybe they're in a state that doesn't enforce it, require it, mandate it. They're saying, why should we bother with this? Why should we spend time, money, pay attention, invest in this? What's the payoff for us? What might you say to those people?
Sure. Well, if I was talking specifically to a GC, right? Again, they're service providers. So are they going to go out and build a green building if no one's asking for it? Probably not, right? Because they're building what's in contractual documents. What I will say is that, and maybe if you're in the middle of nowhere and you've got all the business you can do, maybe you don't care about that. Certainly, it's your choice. But what I'll say is that, if you are building in a lot of areas and for a lot of different clients, and you can't espouse what your strategy is about this, you're just at a competitive disadvantage. I mean, I was talking to one large GC, and yeah, they're a national GC. But last year they had over 150 clients submit to them sustainability questionnaires about their practices that they're doing on their job sites and their offices. And if you can't answer that, that's 150 lost business opportunities, right? This is like, you're not even going to be qualified to build for these people. It's how safety used to be, where sort of optional and you should do this, to now, well, what's your safety score? And if you're not at a certain threshold, you don't meet the requirements of that company. And what we're seeing is that some of the sustainability questionnaires today might be not scored, or optional. And if you don't have a great response, it's not going to hurt you today. But in what risk? How many lost projects? How many lost qualifications are you willing to risk before you're saying, hey, this is something we need to take seriously? So to me, it's not just a nice to have. It's a business strategy that's going to open the doors for you to win more work. And again, a lot of employees find that valuable. This is one of the toughest job markets we have in construction. This better than everybody based on your day job. It's tough to hire people, and if this is a distinguisher for your organization that can attract and retain talent, that is a significant business advantage that you have. So whether it's keeping your workforce, whether it's attracting talent, whether it's winning more work, when I'm talking to CEOs or people saying, why should we do this? Like, what is the risk of not doing it? That's my question. What are you willing to bet? Even if I'm wrong and nobody believes me and you never lose a job, are you willing to gamble? Are you willing to take that risk? Because the investment of doing this and doing it well is so minimal. Like, I'm not saying you can just throw an intern at it, but in the grand scheme of your business operations, to develop, an internal sustainability program and practices is not, reinventing the wheel. It's just sound business practices, and for the investment versus the risk reward, to me, it's so disparate. So that's not typically my argument. It's like, what is the risk? Yeah, even if it never happens, what is the risk? I mean, how many jobs? You lose one job, that's a $10 million project, that's $1.5 million of revenue per year, or whatever those numbers end up being. Like, are you willing to risk that by completely ignoring this? Or are you willing to have 10 positions unfilled because your competitors have programs that attract talent that people would rather go to? That's how I look at it and how I try and frame it, is that this is not a nice to have. This is a business strategy. This is a business decision you need to make, and you need to approach it as such. And the risk of not doing it is so big in today's world that it could potentially be putting you at a competitive disadvantage.
Very fair. Let's say if you're on the owner side, you got projects rolling out, you got initiatives you want to do. Why implement these things? Why start, considering sustainability if not required to?
Same argument, right? That there's a brand risk associated with it, and again, it depends what your business is, right? As an owner or developer, if you're trying to lease office space, right, are you going to be at a competitive disadvantage when your utility bills are higher than your neighbors, right? Your building across the street has these benefits and has these amenities, and you don't. Are you at a risk? If you're a multifamily developer, or it's even single family, right? How are you differentiating your product? So even if you don't believe in the fundamental, underlying reasons that we need to do this, so we're not all, so my home in Savannah, Georgia is not torn up by the next 10 hurricanes that come through next year. If you disregard that altogether, there's business reasons that you need to be doing this in terms of better product, brand differentiation, and keeping up with what the rest of the marketplace is doing. If you're a corporate owner, I mean, again, just, do you want to have healthy, high performing buildings? And you take away the word green, you take away the word sustainable. Do you want to be in a healthy, high performing building, you and your 1,000 employees, or do you want to be in an unhealthy, underperforming building, right? Like, why would you intentionally choose to do the bare minimum when your number one asset, which is your workforce, can come in and be productive, healthier, and have lower operating expenses? I remember my first job out of college, I was working in marketing, and it was a single story, cinder block building with no windows, that I was sharing an office with somebody. And it's like, my goodness, you walked in there and you could just sense the dread of just staring at a blank wall and a monitor all day, versus a healthier, high performing building where you're not dreading it. So even if I made it to work one or two more days that year because I was in a better mental mindset, is that times 1,000 employees or however many employees, like, what does that cost benefit analysis looks like? And you'll see pretty quickly that it's a huge ROI.
Agreed. Agreed. Let's speak to another audience here. Let's say that, you as an owner, you know, you bought into this. You've done your research, you realize, wow, there's a lot of value here. I need to get my team on board with this. I got to get them excited about this. We want to build a culture that is built around this, and this is a huge focus area for us. In addition to what you've said that would probably apply here, what else would be the messaging? What would you be telling people to get them excited about this and to get them to really buy in and be part of this?
Sure, that's a great question. And I'll say, if you go to our website at getgreenbadger.com, we actually have an ESG implementation roadmap for general contractors, because that is the biggest challenge. One of the biggest pitfalls we see is that this becomes, a flavor of the month or an unfunded mandate. And it's, you talk about it for 2 months and then it goes away. And then if it ever resurfaces, it's like, oh yeah, we tried that last year, it didn't work. So again, when we try and frame this discussion, it's around that this is a core business strategy, right? You wouldn't enter a new market or introduce a new product if you didn't do a bunch of research, if you didn't have an advanced sales team, if you didn't have a product roadmap. And sustainability within your organization is no different. You can't just, again, throw an intern at it and say, hey, our intern's going to help us put recycling bins in the office. Let's get on board. It takes a dedicated effort. That doesn't necessarily mean you need to go hire 10 people to do it, but it means people need to have time dedicated to it, and it needs to be reinforced from senior leadership. Again, having where we've seen this fail miserably is when you say it's important and it gets assigned to middle management who has no authority to actually tell people how to do anything. And then a year later, you say, "How do we do?" And then that person is flailing and it's not going to succeed. So having a diverse team in place of job functions. So I mean, that's when we start talking about these. It's not just your operations people. A lot of times it just gets thrown at ops, but I mean, you've got HR, you've got IT, you've got legal. Having a working group that is made up of diverse job functions. Again, not full time, but just that is part of this steering committee really helps. And having it reinforced from senior leadership. If you're a leader and you're saying this is important, you need to walk the talk. You can't, throw not have the recycling bin in your office and throw everything away. You need to set the tone, both reinforcing the messaging throughout the organization and with your own actions. Again, that's typically where we see a breakdown. Is that we said it was important, we never talked about it again. Not naming names, but one of the partners we work with, and we're working with their sustainability team, and their senior leadership said, by 2030 we want to be, I can't remember what it was, carbon neutral or one of the two. And then it's like, all right, well, how does that ripple out? And they're like, well, it's just us doing it. Does it get to the job teams? No, like the job site teams don't even know about this and don't care. It's not a priority for them. Well, to me, that's a huge disconnect. Senior leadership said, in the next 5 years, we want to be here. They tasked, a small team of people to manage hundreds of projects, and it doesn't ripple beyond that. And that just makes it really, really challenging versus, if you said safety's our priority, and you didn't care if the people on site were wearing hard hats and vests and glasses, and you just said this team of 2 people is responsible for making that happen, you're going to have a lot of people with head injuries and eye injuries and getting run over because they didn't have vests on. So it's the same type of messaging, that importance from top to bottom. If it's truly important to you, it can't just be a one-off comment or we're going to do this in the next 10 years. It's got to be something that you're measuring success, you're measuring progress, you have a team in place, and you're consistently reinforcing, or, frankly, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Agreed. It has to come top down. You need buy-in, you need support, and at the highest level, bare minimum, you need people to live it and to demonstrate that they care about it and show that it's a priority and they're taking it seriously. And it's not just window dressing, corporate messaging, or corporate speak. It's something that's actually going to have follow through to it.
100%. And again, that's sustainability. That's anything, right? Like that's just anything you're trying to do. Change management is just so difficult in an organization, right? Again, it's like people don't want to. Everyone will say, yes, this is a great idea, but to change what you've been doing for the last 10 years as you've been sitting in your desk, right? It's people, not that they're resistant, it's just different, and it's difficult. And so managing the process of change management, whatever the topic is, tends to just be the biggest issue, and sustainability is certainly no different.
Awesome. Okay. And I know we have a lot we could cover today. I want to be conscious I'm not going too far too fast down the wrong path. Let's talk about this. What are some of the biggest changes your clients see when they start implementing this? I know we talked about some of the solutions that and benefits they may get, but let's talk about what are some of the biggest changes or case studies or anything you can think of that said, hey, our client was doing this before when they implemented us. This is what they're seeing now. Let's talk about some of those wins.
Sure. So back to change management as a whole, right? So sustainability, as we mentioned earlier, is an evolution. And so as organizations, as contractors, just start to get comfortable with something, one of the challenges is that, okay, now it's going to be completely different. When we look at some of the building standards that are out there, like LEED certification, every 3 to 4 years, it changes and it iterates. And so again, when general contractors, just when they're starting to get built on standards and tools, now it's completely different. And LEED has just come out and said, now every 5 years, our next iteration. So now it's at least going to be a little bit more scheduled, but it's like the tax code, right? You just think you filed your taxes last year and you thought you knew what the standard deduction was and you had your W-2 and now it's like this year is completely different. And sustainability again as a moving target is like that. And that's where a solution like ours is really beneficial. It helps eliminate some of that knowledge gap because you don't have to keep up with it and stay abreast of it. We do that, and then it ripples out to everybody. But again, I think one of the challenges just in construction in general, again, this is more project-based sustainability versus corporate ethos, is that one project might have this requirement and the next one might not, or the next one might have even more requirements. And one of the headaches we've started to see is that there's multiple layers now of sustainability rating systems, and you could be doing things that focus just on the job site. You could be focusing on the landscaping side of things. It's the building itself. There's now health and wellness standards out there. There's local building standards that are out there. And again, for a contractor to be able to stay up to speed on all of those just makes it challenging. And when you start to look at how many of the contractors, if you look on the ENR 400 list, have dedicated sustainability professionals, it's not the majority. And so to help project teams stay on top of this and up to speed on this is just an ongoing challenge. And it's, again, one other thing: you've got to build the building on time, on budget. You've got to do it safely. And now you've got a myriad of sustainability requirements and how you've got to source and vet those products and the processes you have to have. And then in 2 years, when you finish this project, you go on to the next one. Well, now the sustainability requirements are completely different because it has changed and evolved. So it's just one of those, and I'm a proponent of sustainability, obviously, but that's the challenges when we talk about what does the industry see? That is a big one. And it's not something you're, again, focused on every day. It's easy for me to sit here and say I spend all day, every day thinking about sustainable construction. If you're project manager or APM, project engineer, it's like a tiny percentage of your day. And so to figure out how to be an expert in something that is a small percentage of your day, is a challenge. I mean, we see that when we look at our resources. We put out tons of free resources of how do you source sustainable products and how do you manage some of these processes. But it's the teams that are looking at that, they don't have the time to like go read a 50-page ebook and self-educate well in advance. There's so many fires to put out, and this just happens to be another one of those. So it's a continuous improvement process that, again, that's why our software is here to try to help alleviate that one of those fires that everybody's trying to put out here every day.
Agreed. Let's talk about, and those are awesome points. Let's talk about the consideration of sustainability on projects too. I think that's a great transition point. In your experience, how can these sustainable construction practices be made to be economically viable for both large, complex, grand scale projects and smaller local builds as well?
Sure. So great question. Again, if something's challenging and expensive, the odds that it continues to get done decreases exponentially.
Yep.
So how do we do this so that it is straightforward and cost effective? And a lot of it comes down, I think, again, just the ability, if you have the ability to do just a little bit of advanced planning. Where it tends to get expensive is, hey, we've already mobilized, we've got the team, we've started doing things. Now we want to layer this level of sustainability on. Or where we often see it as, hey, we've got a lead certification has different levels, and we've got a goal of this level of lead, and now we're 2/3 of the way in, and now we want this level of lead. And it's like, that was not part of the original plan. You're asking us to pivot. So I think a little bit of advanced planning can go a long way. And it needs to start before you get to the job site, ideally. But certainly, when you look at some of the sustainability practices, it's as soon as you start mobilizing on site, right? This is not like, hey, it's just about what products we're using in the building. It's, all right, we're setting up our job trailer, we're putting up our silt fence. What are our what is our program for inspecting and monitoring this, right? Like we don't want the silt fence to get run over by a truck on the first day, and now we've got discharge coming off of the site. Like that costs you nothing, right? To take that little bit of time to make sure that those measures are in place. I don't know how many SWIP inspections I've seen where there's been deficiencies marked, and it's week over week over week, right? Like remediating some of those things takes no cost, takes a little bit of time, and it's just one of those things you got to make sure gets done. Sourcing, figuring out what your waste management strategy is on site, right? Typically, it's not going to cost you anything more to send it to a recycling facility than it is to a landfill, as long as you've planned that in advance and you've worked with your waste vendor to identify that, hey, we're going to have a separate dumpster because we've got a whole bunch of concrete that we need to have, or these metals actually have value that we can sell to a scrapyard and recycle, versus just saying, we're just going to have one big bin, we're going to throw everything in there and you're going to haul it off and throw it away. So again, it doesn't cost you anything, just takes a little bit more time planning. On the material side of things, a lot of the impact of construction comes to the materials we use. That is where, again, GCs are not specifying products. They're not the ones designing these. They're just doing their best job of, well, how do we manage these as they come in? And that's where we see a little bit more of the challenge. But that's where we start thinking more about, okay, well, can we look at design builds? Do we have the opportunity for contractors to be involved in that process? When we look at really buildings that are really trying to push the envelope of sustainability, design build and having integrated design, it really becomes critical, right? When we start looking at decisions like, should we be using, mass timber versus post-tension concrete or something along those lines, right? Like if the building's already designed, what's a GC going to say? They're going to build what was in there. But if they can be in up front in those conversations, that's where you really start to see substantive improvements and opportunities for improvements. And again, those are decisions that can be made after the fact. Those are decisions that need to be made well in advance of even showing up a job site, because it's into the design of the project. So a long-winded answer to your question, but advanced planning and just putting some thought into this. And again, depending on what your ultimate sustainability goals are, that could start in pre-design and getting contracts involved early, at least in pre-construction and pre-mobilization, to ensure that the practices you're implementing on site are as impactful and as they can be from a sustainability and non-impactful from a budget perspective as you can get.
And you're touching a lot of things here, and I think one thing that is going to be a hot button over the years for this industry, as it has been for others over the last couple of years, is the role of these new types of technology, AI, machine learning, big data, things like that. What are some of these emerging technologies like AI, Internet of Things? How are they being used, and how are they shaping and driving sustainability in construction?
Yeah, and I think it's a huge issue, not issue. It's a huge opportunity. I think construction in general is one of those industries where you always need people doing stuff. So in terms of like insulating your workforce, it's not one that you'll see become obsolete from AI or any of these, because steel doesn't erect itself, drywall doesn't yet hang itself. But in terms of processes and planning, it's a huge opportunity. I think specific to sustainability, on the upfront early planning and design, and being able to, again, look at different analyses of building construction types from an end efficiency point of view, an energy modeling point of view, as well as the embodied carbon of materials. It's going to be a huge opportunity to say, all right, the software is going to be telling you, well, instead of this, you can use this, and you can cut the carbon of your building by 50% instantaneously. I think we'll see a lot of opportunity for that. On the constructability, you're seeing a lot of opportunities on site that provide, again, transparency into the constructability of buildings, and reduce the waste during the construction process in of itself, and optimize material use and material installation. And a lot of that then translates into after the building is built, having digital twins, having exact as-builts of your buildings. If you're an owner and you need to come back in 5 years and see what was behind that wall you've got that now. You've got video of that because people have been walking around with cameras on their helmets this whole time, or you've got drones that are monitoring the construction of these buildings. I mean, it's fun because we're a technology construction technology company, and we're hyper focused on sustainability. But we a lot of our peers are just construction technology in general, and you see all of these niches that do very specific things with technology and construction. And it's when you put them all together, it's awesome opportunities. Again, the challenge being that construction technology, it's somewhat, your pilot phase is really long, right? It's like, hey, I want to try this out on my building. Well, this building might take 3 or 4 years before you have an end result. It's not like, oh, what's this new app called Spotify? I can go listen to a song and create a playlist, and 30 seconds later, I know it's good. It's like, all right, we need to try these things out and test these things. And by the way, if it doesn't work, what impact does that have to your constructability, to your schedule, to the end product? And so that's one of the challenges we face, is that all this technology is awesome and it's great, and it's moving at a pretty quick pace. But in general, the implementation and construction, again, it's back to that risk reward and those trade-offs. It's if there's any uncertainty for this building you're constructing that's supposed to be here for 100 years, right? How do you test that? How do you pilot that? How do you ensure that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing? Because if it doesn't, you're kind of out there on the hook for it. And so again, pros and cons, right? We see all of these great people doing all of these things, but those are all decisions contractors and design teams are making. Do we try this? Do we not try this? Do we try 10 things? Do we try one thing? And how do you then scale that? So those are all opportunities, but challenges that we're all facing in the AI and in the Internet of Things world that we're all living in here.
Yeah. The tech world is so interesting. Just when I thought that something couldn't be done, 6 months, a year later, it gets done. And the tools that are really rolling out have been incredible. I had a guest on this show, I think it was about 3 years back, that talked about the use of drones in construction that almost served in a sense as a member of the pre-con team, where it would do a fly through, flyover of the building, bang out a quick estimate of what was needed, and be fairly accurate down to the exact size and scope of the project, give or take maybe 0.5% off. That was 3 years ago. I can't even imagine what else is out there now.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it is crazy what we're doing and how quickly it is moving. And it's when you came from the industry, if you look at what you were doing 20 years ago and versus what's out there today, and again, whether it's sustainability, whether it's safety, whether it's constructability, the rate it changes, which it's back to one of the earlier issues we talked about, which is change management and the expectations you have of contractors of trying to keep up with all of these things while they're still trying to get that building built on time and on budget. And it just goes, to show back. Kudos to all of these construction teams, because the issues they face and the fires they're trying to put out, and trying to stay up on technology, and trying to incorporate all these other requirements and strategies on their project. It's a constantly drinking from the fire hose here.
It is, sometimes when I'm up in the Northeast, which has some really old stuff, in Boston, as you know, or even down in parts of Florida, like St. Augustine, I'll see these old buildings, they're anywhere from 100 to 200 years old. And I have a combination of respect and awe and, oh my goodness, that thing's still standing. It was built before any of this, and it's survived the test of time in some cases, in really, in pretty harsh climates, and the crazy heat of the southeast, and the crazy changing climate and snow and heat of the northeast. Yeah, it's pretty wild to think about that. With, call it non-existent technology, buildings that were built 200 years ago, some of them are still standing. Reminds me of the saying, I think it's good, good building practices will never be out of style. The good gets better, I find. Let's talk about success, in sustainability, right? Because people that are new to this, they'll probably have questions. one of which might be, what metrics, what tools are you going to be using to evaluate the sustainability performance of a construction project? And how do you define what success looks like?
Sure. So in the construction world, again, a lot of times success is contractually defined because it says thou shalt do this. And frankly, when you look at some of the standards that are out there, 75% of it's sort of on the front end, the design of the building. Again, the contractor is just taking those plans and working to implement them in the most effective means possible. So for our teams, it tends, again, we're in the service industry. So success for our customers is meeting and exceeding owner expectations, right? And that tends to be the number one deliverable. And sustainability is a component of that. And it's, yeah, the building's got to get done on time and on budget, but the sustainability requirements or goals of this owner, we have to help exceed them. And we want to be able to demonstrate that consistently and clearly along the way. I think one of the biggest questions we get, or the headaches we get, is contractors saying, well, we just got to be able to communicate to the owner that we're exceeding these goals or we're meeting these goals, and the transparency into it has been challenging. And again, when you're trying to show it in this convoluted spreadsheet, it makes it really tough. So again, success for our customers or contractors in general, it's we want to meet these owner expectations. We don't just want to meet them; we want to exceed them. It'd sure be nice if we had a roadmap to help us get there, but if not, we will figure this out. Come hell or high water, and yeah, we're gonna do our best to knock it out of the park, even if we're not experts in this field. And that means we're gonna manage our job site performance. We're going to do it safely, but do it as sustainably as possible. And we're going to work with our subs and our vendors to use as healthy and as sustainable products as we can throughout the course of construction, so we can deliver a building that is hopefully going to be here for 200 more years, so that we've got our grandkids and our great grandkids are walking through these cities and saying, "Man, I can't believe this building was here since the year 2025."
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Think about, can our buildings last the next 2, 3, 4, 500 years? That's a fascinating thought. Um, it's interesting. The thing about sustainability for me, Tommy, is in the beginning, I think I, like most years ago, was kind of a skeptic. Said, "What is this?" And then the more over the years I've learned about it, the more I've taken the time to educate myself, the more it's just become a no-brainer. And you either get it or you don't. And I have a lot of compassion, a lot of empathy for those that are still on the fence, or they don't know what they don't know yet. But what I always remind myself, and anyone that's willing to listen, is look, the earth is not full of infinite resources, right? Contrary to popular belief. We need to be focusing on buildings not only that get the job done, but are sustainable. They're healthy. They're going to stand the test of time. Um, and I think if you kind of look outside of yourself and your own interest and think about the interest of the community, the environment, other people that are affected by this, and future generations, sustainability just makes sense. For me, it's become a no-brainer over the years, and I hope that more of the population starts to grasp that. Because again, the earth is not infinite. What we do has consequences, and how we build things has a humongous impact. And it's going to be impacting the community it's built in for decades, or potentially for centuries, hundreds of years.
Yeah, 100%. And it goes back to, if you just reframe what if you take the word sustainability out and just say, look, do you want a high performance healthy building, or do you want the opposite of that? Like, what just makes sense, right? Like, why would you want a low performance unhealthy building? Call it what you will. I don't care. Believe in it or don't believe in it. Do you want better indoor air quality? Do you want products that are not emitting formaldehyde into you that you're going to sit in for 8 to 10 hours? Do you want to build a building and throw away 1,000 tons of waste materials, or do you not want to throw away 1,000 tons of waste materials? It all just makes sense. And I will say, back again 20 years ago, and I'm assuming this is a good thing, but 20 years ago, you got a LEED certification. Like, I remember our first one here in Savannah, and the mayor came out for our plaque ceremony, and like we would do this big to do. Today, it's just like, all right, on to the next. So on
Yep.
one hand, maybe it's lost a little of its luster, but on the other hand, it's just becoming so much more commonplace where it's like, okay, we don't have to celebrate that this is this unique achievement. It's just something we do, and we're gonna continue to elevate our processes
Yes.
along the way. And again, yes, hopefully these buildings are here for a very long time, and some of that's not, that goes well beyond the GC and the constructability. It's did we take that initial forethought on design intent? Are we creating a building that is beautiful and that will stand the test of time, or are we crapping out some, vanilla box building that is built to be destroyed in 25 years when it's run its course? And those are, those are decisions and conversation topics above and beyond what we have time for here today. But the forethought that we put into the design and construction of these buildings, so they stand the test of time, so they have a positive impact on our communities, and the people that are in those buildings is hugely important. And at the end of the day, will dictate, and sustainability needs to be part of that conversation.
Well, my man, I appreciate it. This is awesome. And if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to reach you? If they want to get in touch and got questions for you, whether it's about sustainability, about your company, they just want to talk shop, what's the best?
Sure. Yeah, anybody can get to me through email is the best way. It's just tommy@getgreenbadger.com, or you can get to our website and track us down. All of those messages will come through and find us one way or the other.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Tommy, thanks again for coming on the show.